Sometimes, the smallest voice in the room speaks the loudest not through sound, but through courage. And sometimes, the person you least expect becomes the miracle someone has been waiting for. We live in a world that often glorifies grand gestures, loud personalities, and big achievements. People are praised for making headlines, for shaking industries, for building empires that stretch across continents. Yet this story reminds us of a timeless truth. Sometimes it is the smallest act, a moment of courage, a single step forward, a touch of compassion that can transform a life, shift a heart, or even change an entire atmosphere. Small actions are the quiet seeds of transformation, often unnoticed at first, but capable of growing into something extraordinary. In the case of the shy waitress, her single decision to step forward and communicate in sign language seemed like such a small act on the surface. It was not dramatic. She did not stand on a stage or loudly announce what she was doing. She simply moved closer, raised her hands, and signed a message of understanding to an elderly woman who had gone far too long without being properly heard. For many people watching, it may have looked like nothing more than a polite gesture. But for the billionaire's mother, it was everything. Small actions hold power because they often meet needs that the world overlooks. We assume the big problems require big solutions. But sometimes, what a person truly needs is human connection, a moment of dignity, someone who takes the time to speak in their language even if that language is silence shaped into signs. What the waitress offered was not a financial gift, not a grand display, but the simple message, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And for a woman who struggled daily with the frustration of not being understood, that message was priceless. This encounter also reminds us that impact is not determined by the size of the action, but by the depth of its heart. The waitress did not know she was serving a billionaire. She did not know that cameras would be watching or that people would talk about this moment later. Her act was pure, motivated by empathy, not reward. And because it was genuine, it reached deeper than any forced politeness ever could. Consider how the energy in the room shifted. A bustling restaurant, full of noise and movement, suddenly became quiet. Not because the waitress demanded attention, but because compassion has a way of commanding respect without ever raising its voice. Her small action created a ripple. The staff paused, customers watched, and the billionaire, a man accustomed to power, influence, and control, felt something he wasn't expecting: vulnerability. He wasn't moved by the technical skill of sign language. He was moved by the thought that someone would care enough to use it. For a man who could buy anything, he realized in that moment that the most meaningful things in life are the ones that cannot be purchased. The connection between his mother and the waitress was not built on wealth, words, or recognition. It was built on kindness. And that realization shattered him in the most human way possible. This shows us that small actions often carry emotional weight far beyond the moment they occur. They linger, they echo, they plant themselves in memory. The billionaire didn't cry because of what the waitress did. He cried because of what her action represented. It reminded him of his mother's struggles, of moments when she must have felt isolated in a world that didn't understand her. And it reminded him that there are still people, strangers, who are willing to show kindness without expecting anything in return. Small actions also reveal character. When someone thinks nobody is watching, that is when their true heart shows. The waitress showed bravery despite being shy. She showed initiative in a room where others hesitated. She showed empathy when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Her action, while small, spoke volumes about who she was. A person who cared enough to step outside her comfort zone. And that brings us to another powerful truth. Small actions are often difficult not because of the action itself, but because they require overcoming internal barriers. For a shy person, speaking up or stepping forward can feel like climbing a mountain. But courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is a quiet whisper that says, "Go ahead, they need you." The waitress listened to that whisper, and in doing so, she changed not only a moment, but the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Her action also demonstrates how small acts can create chain reactions. The billionaire's gratitude may inspire him to support accessibility initiatives, donate to organizations that teach sign language, or train his staff to communicate better with people who have hearing impairments. The restaurant staff may begin learning basic signs to better serve future customers. Other witnesses may reflect on how they treat people who seem different or who struggle to communicate. One small act becomes a spark that lights other candles. Even the audience hearing this story today is affected. We are reminded that kindness is always within reach. We do not need wealth, fame, or status to make a difference. Every day presents moments, small, simple moments where we can choose compassion. Choosing kindness does not always change the world, but it always changes someone's world. That is the power of small actions. They are easy to underestimate, impossible to measure, and unforgettable in their impact. In a world filled with spoken languages, cultural differences, and unique forms of communication, it is easy to forget that there is one language every human being understands instinctively: compassion. It requires no grammar, no vocabulary, no translation device, and no formal training. Compassion flows naturally from the heart, and its impact can be felt even when no words are exchanged. The moment the shy waitress stepped forward to communicate with the billionaire's deaf mother, she proved that understanding someone goes far beyond the mechanics of language. It is rooted in care, connection, and the simple willingness to reach out. Compassion transcends limitations. Where words fail, compassion speaks. Where misunderstandings arise, compassion clarifies. And where isolation grows, compassion bridges the gap. The deaf mother had spent much of her life navigating a world that did not always adjust itself for her. People often communicated around her rather than with her. Many spoke loudly, slowly, or impatiently, all ineffective attempts to mask deeper discomfort. For her, communication was often a battlefield, not a bridge. But when the waitress approached and began signing, everything shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, valued, and understood in a way that went beyond lip movements or written notes. This act was not merely about sign language, it was about empathy. The waitress didn't just communicate in a different medium, she communicated with her heart. Learning sign language is not always easy, and mastering it takes time, yet what matters is the intention behind it. The waitress had learned it, at some point in her life, because she believed in the importance of inclusivity. Even though she was shy, even though she didn't stand out in her everyday life, she carried within her a compassion that was waiting for the right moment to shine. Many people forget that compassion is most powerful when given freely, not when it is convenient. The waitress did not step forward for applause or recognition. She acted because compassion compelled her to. In that moment, her quiet nature became her strength. Her gentleness made her approach less intimidating. Her sincerity broke through the tension at the table. Compassion allowed her to connect not just with the deaf woman, but with everyone who witnessed the moment, proving that empathy is contagious. We often underestimate the emotional hunger that people carry within them. The deaf mother was not just struggling to communicate. She was longing to be included, to be part of the world instead of simply observing it from the sidelines. Compassion fulfilled that longing. The billionaire, who had tried countless ways to make his mother's life easier, suddenly realized that strangers could offer her something even he, with all his resources, struggled to provide genuine human connection rooted in patience and understanding. There is something deeply universal about compassion. It awakens humanity in everyone who witnesses it. That is why people in the restaurant stopped and stared. That is why the billionaire was brought to tears. They were not reacting to the technical execution of sign language. They were responding to the universal experience of witnessing kindness. Compassion has a way of breaking down walls, emotional walls, social walls, even psychological ones. When someone acts with pure kindness, It disarms the human heart in the most profound way. People become soft, defenses drop, truth rises. Compassion also communicates worth. When the waitress engaged the elderly mother in her own language, she was saying without words, "You matter, your voice matters, your presence matters." For someone who felt overlooked by society, that message was life-giving. In a world that often overlooks people with disabilities, compassion becomes a lifeline, a way of returning dignity and restoring confidence. The deaf mother's eyes filling with emotion showed that compassion doesn't just touch the mind, it reaches the soul. This moment also highlights how compassion requires awareness. The waitress noticed something others did not, the mother's struggle. While others were focused on orders, schedules, and routines, the waitress paid attention to the emotional need in front of her. Awareness is the foundation of compassion. You cannot show empathy if you are not paying attention. Her ability to see beyond the surface allowed her to respond with care rather than frustration or confusion. True compassion is never blind, it sees deeply. There is also a powerful lesson here about connection between strangers. We often think compassion must be reserved for family, friends, or people we know well. But the most beautiful acts of kindness often come from strangers who have no obligation to help. The waitress did not owe this family anything. She wasn't required to know sign language, and yet she chose to respond with compassion not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That choice made her action more meaningful. Compassion also inspires courage. For a shy person, stepping forward can be terrifying, but compassion overpowered her fear. It reminded her that acting for someone else's benefit is more important than her own discomfort. This is where compassion becomes transformative. It changes the giver as much as the receiver. Her confidence grew, her purpose became clearer, and she found her place in a moment that would touch many hearts. Finally, compassion unites us. It reminds us that despite our differences, wealth, status, communication styles, backgrounds, we share the same emotional core. We all want to be understood. We all want to be respected. We all want to feel human, and compassion, more than any spoken language, gives us that sense of belonging. In our modern world, wealth is often measured by numbers, bank balances, luxury cars, sprawling mansions, and corporate empires. Society celebrates billionaires as if their financial success automatically reflects their personal fulfillment. But moments like the one between the shy waitress and the billionaire's deaf mother remind us that true wealth is not found in money. It is found in emotion, connection, and humanity. The billionaire in this story possessed everything society considers valuable, yet what moved him to tears was something he could never buy: compassion shown to someone he loved. True wealth begins where material wealth ends. Money can purchase comfort, but it cannot buy kindness. It can buy company, but it cannot guarantee connection. It can hire helpers, but it cannot create genuine care. A billionaire can fill a mansion with people, yet still feel alone. He can hire the best staff for his mother, yet still fail to find someone who truly sees her. But in one simple moment, a shy waitress with no riches, no influence, no spotlight gave his mother something priceless: the feeling of being understood. Financial wealth often creates distance. It separates people through status, privilege, and lifestyle. But emotional wealth does the opposite. It brings people closer. The billionaire had lived his life surrounded by people who respected him because of his money. Employees served him because they were paid to. Associates praised him because they needed him. But the waitress approached not because she was ordered to, not because she wanted to impress him, but because she felt compassion for his mother. That sincerity broke through the protective layers he had built around himself. When he saw someone communicate with his mother in sign language, he realized something profound. All the wealth he possessed still could not give his mother what she had just received from a stranger: dignity. For years, he might have struggled to help her feel included. He may have bought her devices, hired therapists, provided the best medical equipment, yet none of it filled the emotional gap she faced daily. Money could solve technical problems, but it could not solve loneliness. It could make her life easier, but not necessarily richer. That richness came from an unexpected place, delivered by a shy girl who probably earned in a month what he spent in an hour. This moment also revealed the emotional poverty that can hide behind material abundance. The billionaire's tears did not come from sadness alone. They came from realization. Realization that while he was financially wealthy, he had been emotionally powerless in giving his mother the experience of being understood in public. Realization that his wealth could not shield her from the daily challenges of being deaf in a hearing world. Realization that money, no matter how much, has limits, and those limits become painfully visible when someone you love is suffering in ways you cannot fix. Emotional wealth, however, expands infinitely. It grows the more you give it. The shy waitress may not have had financial fortune, but she possessed emotional richness, empathy, awareness, kindness, patience. These qualities cannot be bought, traded, or inherited. They are developed through heart, experience, and character. And in that restaurant, she became the wealthiest person in the room not because of money, but because of the humanity she offered. True wealth also reveals itself in moments of vulnerability. When the billionaire cried, he was not showing weakness, he was showing emotional depth. His reaction proved that deep down, every human, rich or poor, craves connection. Every heart longs for the comfort of seeing a loved one treated with compassion. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a powerful figure. He was simply a son who loved his mother, watching a stranger honor her in a way few ever had. Another important aspect of true wealth is the legacy it creates. Financial wealth can be inherited, but emotional wealth is passed on through actions. What the waitress did may influence how the billionaire views kindness, accessibility, and empathy. It may inspire him to invest in communities, support sign language education, or create programs for people with disabilities. Her simple act held the potential to change not just his heart, but also his future choices, a ripple effect far greater than any business investment. This moment teaches another powerful truth. People remember how you make them feel, not what you own. Long after the billionaire forgets the expensive meals, meetings, or purchases of his day, he will remember this waitress. His mother will remember the comfort she felt. Others in the restaurant will remember the emotional impact. True wealth, emotional wealth, carves itself into memory because it touches the soul, not the senses. Finally, true wealth is shared through kindness. Money, when spent, decreases. Emotional wealth, when shared, multiplies. By offering a moment of connection, the waitress enriched not only the billionaire's mother, but also herself and everyone around her. She proved that you don't need a fortune to be generous. A rich heart can create miracles that even $1 billion cannot replicate. Accessibility and understanding are two concepts that are often spoken about in professional or academic settings. Yet their true meaning becomes clearest in everyday life, in restaurants, in public spaces, in conversations, and in the simple interactions that shape a person's sense of belonging. The story of the shy waitress and the billionaire's deaf mother reveals why these values matter so deeply. It shows that accessibility is not just about physical tools or legal requirements. It is about emotional inclusion, respect, and the recognition of someone's humanity. For the deaf mother, navigating the world had always been a silent struggle. People often assumed that raising their voice, repeating themselves, or speaking slowly would somehow bridge the gap, when in truth, those attempts did nothing to make her feel understood. Accessibility is not about volume, it is about method. It is about meeting someone at their level, in their language, in a way that makes them feel seen rather than singled out. This is where understanding becomes essential. Without understanding, accessibility becomes mechanical. With understanding, accessibility becomes compassionate. In the restaurant scene, accessibility was missing at first. Staff members didn't know how to communicate with her. They were well-meaning but unequipped, and that lack of preparation, which is so common in public spaces, immediately placed the deaf mother in a vulnerable position. She was left trying to express her needs in a place designed for communication, yet ironically unable to communicate. This humiliation is something many people with disabilities experience daily, not because they cannot communicate, but because the world has not made the effort to learn how to communicate with them. That is why accessibility matters. It gives people the basic dignity to exist comfortably in public spaces. When the shy waitress stepped forward and began signing, she wasn't just performing an act of kindness. She was restoring accessibility. She was reminding everyone that communication is a human right, not a luxury. Her actions silently questioned why the world expects people with disabilities to constantly adapt, instead of adapting itself to include them. Understanding, in this context, means seeing the deeper struggle behind a person's silence. It means realizing that where communication barriers exist, emotional barriers grow. Many people with hearing impairments feel overlooked in conversations, excluded from social moments, or treated with impatience. Every misunderstanding becomes another reminder that the world is not built with them in mind. But when the waitress signed to the elderly mother, she broke that pattern not with fancy technology, but with awareness and compassion. Accessibility also matters because it affects emotional well-being. The moment the billionaire's mother saw someone signing to her, her entire expression changed. Her posture softened. Her eyes lit up. She felt included, respected, and valued. That shift in her emotional state showed just how much invisible weight she had been carrying. This moment revealed the truth. People thrive when the world makes space for them. Sometimes accessibility is seen as a technical requirement: ramps, devices, special seating, translations. But emotional accessibility is just as important. Emotional accessibility means creating an environment where people feel safe to express themselves, even if they communicate differently. It means being patient, being aware, and being willing to adjust rather than expecting others to always adjust for you. Understanding requires humility. It asks us to admit we don't know everything, to learn from others, and to take the initiative to bridge communication gaps. The waitress, despite being shy, possessed this humility. She observed the situation, recognized a need, and stepped in. She didn't wait for someone to ask her. She didn't question whether it was her place. Understanding moved her to act. Her gesture also served as a quiet reminder that accessibility is everyone's responsibility, not just institutions, not just governments, not just organizations. Every individual has the power to make their environment more inclusive. A single person trained in sign language can transform an entire experience for someone who relies on it. A single person willing to slow down and listen can turn frustration into relief. A single person who treats differences with respect can make someone feel human again. The billionaire's emotional reaction revealed another layer of why accessibility matters. It affects families. People with disabilities don't navigate the world alone, their loved ones navigate it with them. The billionaire had spent years watching his mother struggle. He had likely felt helpless at times, frustrated with the world's lack of accommodation, or guilty that he couldn't shield her from isolation. When the waitress signed to his mother, she wasn't just helping the elderly woman, she was relieving years of emotional strain from the son who cared for her. Accessibility uplifts not just individuals, but entire families. Furthermore, accessibility is not only about helping those with disabilities, it enriches society as a whole. It teaches patience, empathy, and cultural awareness. It breaks down ignorance and replaces it with understanding. It opens communication paths that may have never existed otherwise. This moment in the restaurant also shows how understanding brings out the best in people. The staff watched in awe. Customers paused. The entire environment softened. Why? Because accessibility, when done with compassion, elevates humanity. It turns a simple place into a welcoming one. It transforms discomfort into connection. Accessibility and understanding matter because they remind us that every person deserves to be heard, not just spoken to. They remind us that communication is more than sound, it is intention. And most importantly, they remind us that when we make room for someone who has been pushed aside by society, we make the world more humane for everyone. Courage is often portrayed as loud, bold, and unmistakable, the kind of bravery seen in heroes who stand on stages, command rooms, and face danger without blinking. But in reality, courage frequently appears in moments so quiet, so gentle, that they go unnoticed unless you look closely. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is a shy girl taking a trembling step toward someone in need. Sometimes it is a soft voice speaking up in a room full of noise. And sometimes, courage comes from the very people the world overlooks. The shy waitress in this story is the perfect example of unexpected bravery. People saw her as timid, introverted, and reserved. She moved quietly through her work, keeping her head down and avoiding attention. No one would have guessed that she possessed the courage to step forward when others hesitated. But courage is not about personality. It is about action. It is about what you choose to do in the moment that matters. When she saw the billionaire's deaf mother struggling to communicate, she faced a choice. She could stay silent, as she usually did, and continue her work unnoticed. Or she could step outside her comfort zone, risk drawing attention to herself, and help someone in need. For many shy people, that tiny step forward feels monumental. It can feel like standing on a cliff, preparing to jump, and yet she did it, not for applause, not for recognition, but because compassion pulled her past fear. This teaches us that courage often appears when we least expect it, especially from those who underestimate themselves. The waitress probably never thought of herself as brave. She likely believed others were stronger, bolder, or more capable. Yet, she discovered courage in the moment it was required of her. That is one of life's most surprising truths. People are often braver than they realize. They simply need the right moment to reveal it. Her courage was quiet, but it was powerful. She didn't raise her voice or demand attention. She used her hands, trembling at first, to communicate in sign language. The very act of approaching the table required bravery. All eyes were watching. The situation was tense. The billionaire himself was frustrated, the staff uncertain, and the mother distressed. Stepping into such a moment takes inner strength that cannot be taught, only felt. Her courage also challenges society's assumptions about strength. We often equate confidence with bravery and shyness with weakness, but this moment proves that shy people can be incredibly brave precisely because they act despite their fear, not in the absence of it. Courage is not about being fearless, it is about being willing, and willingness often emerges more strongly in those who understand what it means to feel overlooked or misunderstood. Another important aspect of her courage is that it came from empathy, not ego. She was not bravely defending herself or promoting her own interests. She was stepping forward for someone else. That kind of selfless courage is even rarer. It is one thing to be brave when your own reputation or pride is on the line. It is another to be brave solely because someone else is struggling. Courage in this context became the force that broke barriers. It broke through her shyness. It broke through the communication gap. It broke through the emotional tension in the room, and in doing so, it inspired others. The staff was moved. Customers were touched. The billionaire, a man who likely dealt with powerful people daily, witnessed a humble act of bravery that left him vulnerable and emotional. This shows that courage is contagious. When one person chooses bravery, even in the smallest of ways, others feel empowered to do the same. The shy waitress showed everyone present that you do not need authority to make a difference. You do not need confidence to step forward. You simply need heart. Her courage also carried authenticity. It wasn't rehearsed or polished. It wasn't motivated by desire for praise. It was raw, real, and deeply human. That authenticity is what made the moment so impactful. People are moved by genuine actions, not performances. The waitress acted because she cared, and that sincerity is what made her courage shine brighter than any grand gesture ever could. It is also important to understand what might have been happening inside her as she approached the table. Fear doesn't disappear in moments of courage, it walks alongside it. Her hands may have shaken, her voice may have caught, her heart may have raced, but she still chose to move forward. That internal struggle is what defines true bravery. The more afraid you are, the more courageous it is to act. The waitress's courage reminds us that heroes are not always the people we expect. Sometimes they wear uniforms, medals, or suits. But just as often, they wear aprons, name tags, and quiet personalities. Their bravery is not displayed on stages but expressed in moments of kindness. They don't seek attention, they seek to help. They don't try to stand out, they simply step up. The billionaire, who had likely met countless powerful individuals, was brought to tears by the bravery of someone society might have overlooked. Because deep down, courage touches us. It reminds us of our own humanity. It shows us that even in a world full of noise, the quietest acts of bravery can speak the loudest. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this moment is that the waitress didn't even realize she was being brave. She was simply doing what felt right. Courage, then, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers, "Go, they need you," and a shy person listens. Kindness is one of the most powerful forces in the world, not because it demands attention, but because it changes people quietly, gently, and deeply. It does not shout, it does not force, and it does not seek reward. Yet, when used sincerely, kindness can transform hearts, relationships, environments, and even entire belief systems. The moment the shy waitress interacted with the billionaire's deaf mother is a perfect demonstration of how a simple act of kindness can create waves of change, waves that continue long after the moment has passed. Kindness has the ability to break down emotional walls in ways that logic or authority cannot. The billionaire had probably spent years watching the world treat his mother with impatience, confusion, or indifference. Over time, this likely built frustration, sadness, or even resentment within him. But in one moment, with one kind gesture from a stranger, all those emotional barriers cracked open. His mother wasn't just helped, she was honored, respected, and embraced through an act that required no words. This is the transformative power of kindness. It softens what has been hardened, heals what has been wounded, and opens what has been closed. The transformation began with the mother herself. Her expression changed the moment she was met with kindness. A woman who had grown used to struggling in silence suddenly felt understood. Her posture shifted, her eyes lit up, her face relaxed. For her, this wasn't just communication, it was acceptance. It was belonging. Kindness gave her a sense of inclusion that she had been denied in many other public spaces. This emotional transformation is subtle but profound. When someone is treated with respect rather than pity, they reclaim their dignity. They feel whole again, but kindness rarely affects only one person. Its influence spreads outward like ripples in water. The billionaire, who lived in a world full of transactions, business deals, and structured interactions, was struck by the purity of what he witnessed. All the power, wealth, influence, and control he had accumulated could not create the moment he just saw, but kindness did, and that realization transformed him. It reminded him that genuine human connection is far more valuable than anything money can buy. It filled him with gratitude, vulnerability, and humility, and those emotions often lead to change, real, lasting change. Kindness also transformed the atmosphere of the restaurant itself. Employees who had been rushing, customers who had been immersed in their own conversations, and staff who felt helpless watching the communication struggle all paused. When people witness kindness, it interrupts their routine. It reminds them of their own capacity to care. It turns a chaotic environment into a reflective one. In that moment, the room shifted from frustration to admiration, from tension to warmth. A single gesture created emotional harmony where there had once been discomfort. This moment also planted seeds in the minds of everyone present, seeds that could grow into future acts of kindness. Perhaps a waiter who witnessed the scene will decide to learn basic sign language. Perhaps a customer will think twice before judging someone who communicates differently. Perhaps the restaurant will implement training for accessibility. When kindness is displayed, it inspires reflection, and reflection inspires change. People begin to ask themselves, what can I do? How can I help? How can I make someone else feel seen? This is how kindness multiplies through inspiration. On a deeper level, kindness transforms the giver just as much as the receiver. The shy waitress, in stepping forward, discovered her own strength. Her kindness led her to overcome her fear. Her decision to help strengthened her confidence, her empathy, and her sense of purpose. She realized that her quiet nature did not make her weak. It made her gentle, observant, and capable of seeing what others overlooked. Kindness revealed her own potential to herself, which is one of the most empowering transformations a person can experience. Kindness also has the ability to transform societal perspectives. People often underestimate the deaf community, assuming they are difficult to communicate with or requiring too much effort. But the waitress's action challenged that stereotype. Her kindness showed that communication is possible, meaningful, and beautiful when approached with patience and willingness. Transformation happens when people see what is possible, when they realize that barriers can be crossed, not through technology or policy alone, but through human compassion. Even the billionaire's relationship with his mother may have been transformed by this moment. Seeing her light up may have encouraged him to seek more spaces where she feels included. It may have motivated him to advocate for accessibility, or to ensure that people like her are treated with kindness everywhere they go. Acts of kindness often inspire those with resources to create broader change, to turn personal inspiration into public impact. And finally, the greatest transformation that kindness inspires is within the collective human spirit. It reminds us that despite our differences, our struggles, and our imperfections, we all share the same emotional core. We all want to be seen, understood, and valued. Kindness reconnects us with that truth. It reminds us that the world can be softened, moment by moment, gesture by gesture, by ordinary people who choose to care. In the end, kindness is not small, it is not weak, it is not insignificant. It is one of the most transformative forces available to humanity. And the shy waitress proved exactly that the moment she reached out her hands and signed the language of the heart. So as we look back at this simple yet extraordinary moment, a shy waitress, a deaf mother, and a son whose heart was shattered open, we're reminded of something the world often forgets. Greatness isn't defined by power, fame, or wealth. It's defined by the courage to care. We don't need grand gestures to make a difference. What we need is awareness. What we need is empathy. What we need is the willingness to step forward when it matters, even if our voice shakes or our hands tremble. Because every one of us carries the power to change someone's day, someone's heart, even someone's life, not through perfection, but through compassion. May we all walk into the world with eyes that see beyond the surface, hands ready to help, and hearts brave enough to be kind. And if there is one thing to take from this story, let it be this. Your smallest act of kindness could be the moment someone remembers for the rest of their life. Let us be the reason someone believes that humanity is still beautiful. Thank you.